Hello and howdy, everyone. Welcome to another Angular Air. I'm very excited for this one. I'm your host, Alyssa Nicoll, and with me today I have the two amazing panelists, Mike Brocchi below me. Hello, darling. And Justin next to him. Hi, Justin. Sorry,
Hello.
Justin Schwartzenberger. I don't know why I gave like Mike a full name and you only got a first name, but that was
It's all good.
Our streaming service charges by the letter.
Oh yeah. Our guest of honor today is Ankita. Hello, Ankita. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm so happy to be here. Very
So,
excited.
we want to do a quick intro before we hop into the topic for people who might not have had the pleasure of seeing you speak before or at a conference or online. So, would you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. I'm Ankita, currently based out of Austin, Texas. I am an Angular GDE, and during the day, I make money by working as a senior software engineer at a cybersecurity company. Lots of fun. What else? I love hiking, biking, paddleboarding. I can keep going on, I guess.
I feel like Austin's the perfect city for
It is,
like, you and your
except for
hobbies.
when it's like 100 degrees for 100 days nonstop, which is fine because, that's what summers are,
That's why when it's that hot, you do the paddleboarding and you just get really bad balance. So you pull off the water.
Yeah, you just, yeah. There are lots of lakes here where the temperatures are 67 degrees. How
Oh,
much is that in Celsius? I think like less than 20 Celsius. I think
yes.
I used to know this, but yeah. So throughout the year, so during the summer, we just live underwater as much as we can.
And the bats. The last time I was in
Oh.
Austin, I went to see the bats. Do you see them like nightly or daily or like?
Yeah, every now and then there'll be a swirl of bats. Like I don't know, even if I'm not near the Congress Bridge, where they reside, it's the largest cave of bats in North America from September to February, or I think I saw a stream of bats flying out like last week, so I think they're still here. So
It's so freaking cool. If you visit in her city, you got to see the bats, man. You got to go make a visit to see.
Look up photos of bats, Austin bats. Just look those up, and you'll see a swirl of bats. It's like a big wave of bats. It's kind of hard to describe. It feels strange when you just talk about it without seeing it, but.
Yeah. So tell us, what is our topic for today's show? What are we getting into?
Well, I know there's a lot happening in the Angular world, but there's also a lot happening in the Angular material world. And I just wanted to help everyone keep up with it. It's like this UI framework / library, which I'm sure everyone is aware of, even though they might not use it. And it's one of the biggest advantages of it is supported by the Angular material team and it's free. However, there's lots of things that has in the past gotten hate for, and the Angular material team, which is probably like 2.5 people who work on it, has been working really hard to keep up with the recent times for both Angular side of it and just general material design, because it is based out of Google Materials Design. And so when Material updated to version 3, Angular Material team updated their components to be aligned with Material 3 version. As far as I can tell, this is the only framework the only UI library that is now on Material, the only material-based library that is on Material 3, if that makes sense. Like for Vue, we have Vue's, I forget the name. Like for other frameworks, there are all these other material-based libraries, material design-based libraries, but they're all still on Material 2. And Angular Material is the only one who has managed to update their components, their design principles and guidelines to Material 3, which is Google Materials' latest version.
That's awesome. How long ago was the switch from 2 to 3? one material? Like, was that recent or was that like people are
Yeah,
just
so
taking their time?
the Angular material team has been iteratively working on it. I think version 15, they started changing some internal APIs, and version 19, they're fully 100% material 3 only. They started making changes within the internal APIs 15 onwards so that they could adopt material 3. So they started changing their internal tokens and started switching to we have a more token based approach versus and making so that it's also more customizable and adoptable and stuff like that. So I know this we started noticing changes version 15 onwards, and then now with version 19, not only have they fully transitioned to material 3, but they also have all these APIs that allow you to customize based on those if you want to, because that was one of the biggest things that was so hard to customize material. I think that was one of the primary reasons why NGT was even invented or has been around. So
Michael
yeah,
in the chat said the rollout felt like Ivy, a lot of subtle changes, then
changes.
boom.
That's exactly how it was, because I remember from when we were updating to 15, material became a pain too, because as everybody, we had also overridden at work a lot of material um, components, because why not? Like, you want to be able to customize it, but there was no easy way to do it. But they changed the internal API, and they tell you not to touch the internal API. So what do we do? Of course, change it, try to override it. And then of course we suffer when we want to upgrade. So we had
I was gonna be like, you guys are brave.
yeah,
Brave.
yeah. They still have that default. If you scroll at the documentation at the bottom, they have a disclaimer that talks about we do not approve of any overrides that are outside of what has been outlined here. But I think everyone does it. But that's been how you just use Angular material, and that's just how things have been. So yeah, they've been changing a lot of things. So I just thought I would help people keep up with it.
Love it. You want me to share your screen? Are we ready for
Yeah.
some?
The other
Yes.
thing about material, this is just their homepage. The other thing about material is that you don't have to switch to material 3. You can continue using the theming and other APIs of the material 2 components if you want to. And they have all these guides here. So if you want to theme using material 2, you can absolutely do that. But then you're still stuck in the old way of customizing or theming, which require generating palettes. So it says M2 define theme, and when you update, if you choose to update your app to V18 or V19, specifically now that we're in V19 world version, it would just, if you can select that you don't want to update to material 3, and you can live in the material 2 world. However, it then it just still you're still stuck in the customization hellhole, because it's not easy to keep doing that. And there are all these, what I used to feel like, blockers from a developer standpoint, who's might have to understand material guidelines to be able to even develop it. um, it just makes it a lot more challenging to stick in that world. Plus, I think you want, even if you compare the 2 versions of the components, I don't know, maybe light theme is better for when you're demoing. But if you compare examples of what these are versus what it used to be before we had, so like version, I'll switch to light. Like, you can see they're more, what is this, horizontal variations versus vertical variations for components, or just buttons. And these are just buttons, and they look more antedated, the design does, because again, this is not material 3. Google spent a lot of money bringing in a lot of psychologists and doing a lot of behavior, human computer interaction studies to come up with material tree design. So you would imagine that the latest is the greatest, and you would want to adapt those design principles as much as possible while still being able to customize it.
Mm.
So up until version 2, of material used to have this concept of primary, secondary, primary accent, and have customizations focused on that. All of that has gone away, and you can, so the color button colors would be derived from color palette, primary color palette, and secondary
Oh.
color palette, and things like that, which is hard to wrap your head around sometimes of when you just want to add a basic button. So so with version 3, you don't really have to focus on that. You can have color palette defined for your component, and then
Mm.
have different, and then you can customize it easily. And the guides are as helpful as documentations are, so which is that is open to interpretation. It's helpful.
I was like intentionally vague. I like it.
It is helpful that it'll get you somewhere, and sometimes you have to do your own work
Mm, yeah.
to figure out what. But I've been playing around with it quite a lot, and I thought it would be helpful to share that with the community.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so one another thing that is new. So we have all these guides for theming and understanding. The one new thing is that now all the components are, their customizations are based out of CSS tokens or design tokens that the material team has identified. So even though you still have those primary or secondary, I guess you just have primary now. You have primary and other colors, or error colors and other surface colors. And again, this is like what material design principles are derived from. And material is, even the name material comes from how in an actual world you interact with the material, and it has like edges and rounded corners and height or elevation and depth and shadows, and that tells you how, in what ways you can interact with the material. And that's how Google Materials design principles have been built upon. So that's kind of like the surface, whether it has high contrast, or I mean, you can go on and on about talking about just the psychology and all the design science and color science that they have built material upon, but that's what it has been built upon, and that's what Angular material has been built upon. So you see the similar terminology that has been used here. So everything is now based on these system CSS tokens, which makes it so much more powerful to customize, because then you can really own every single thing about a material component: its color, its box shadow, its padding, and things like that.
So is the general idea then to just have basically your brand defined within like using their variables, and then that way anytime you pull in like a component, like it just automatically updates? Like, or let's say you don't have a brand and like you just throw them in, I'm assuming it would still have like good color contrast and wouldn't just be like,
so there's a support for both those kind of people who have exact colors that they want to use, B, don't know what they want to use, just have maybe one hex color, and just, or maybe someone just wants to get started quick to prototype. Earlier you would have to create a primary color palette, an error color palette, accent color palette. Not many developers even know how to create color palettes. And then you would have to either work with a designer to have the hues defined and all those. You needed a palette basically to do that. Otherwise you would, and you like, no one really actually uses, material has their own color palettes, but no one actually, for especially an enterprise application, you don't end up using all these pre-built color palettes. I barely see that in production. Maybe for prototyping, sure, but when you want to be able to use it, um, it was really hard to have to generate that by yourself because you needed a palette. Um, and so with the new version, they have kind of shifted that. And I have a demo app that I can show all the different ways you can do that. So you can either use their pre-built color palette, or you can run the schematic. And that's another thing. They have added more schematics for Angular material than we've ever had. Earlier, there was just a schematic to add material and CDK in an existing project. Now you can actually generate a palette with it, and I'll demo that in a bit. And then they have support for light theme and dark theme is also better now. So, I mean, this color scheme, this exact color scheme light dark, that's not Angular material specific, right? That is something that is CSS3. And when you specify that, then what it does is that it depends, it sets the theming based on the user system preferences. So if you do light dark, it'll have primary as light and then pick up dark based on what the user system preferences. Or you can just have color scheme light, or you can just have color scheme dark, and that's what like by default you can have light, and that's what your app will always show up by default. But then if you have dark theme, you do color scheme dark, the app shows in the dark theme. However, notice they're only defining or including the theme once with just one color palette. So this is where the color science kicks in, and it tries to accommodate that palette hues colors or what it should be in the light theme versus what it should be in the dark theme. So you don't have to define all the palettes for all how so many other themes that you might want if you want more than light and dark. So that's one step that has become so much more easier already. If you just stick with one color palette and you just do light and dark, it picks up the appropriate shades of that palette that it should be for light and dark, for contrast and stuff like that. However, most of us are given a hex value that we have to work with and not a palette. Most of us are like, the designers don't know how the science would come up. They want to be able to match this design of the hex value exactly with Figma. So relying on this strategy may or may not work. I guess it depends on your use case. So then you can specify exact hex values if you run the schematic. Let's go to guides again. So if you run if you run the schematic, you can specify the exact hex value and use that. And I'll show an example of this to you. But all the other new schematics that we have now are to generate components that are usage based. So if you need a dashboard component, you just run the dashboard schematic and it will spit out a component with multiple designs, material cards and menus, and is responsive already. Or if you want to spit out a form, you just run that schematic, and
when you're like doing the schematic, do you like form has email, form has name, like in the line, like?
Yeah. So while for this one, the address form, let's just do that quick. Actually, I'm gonna share everything. Share entire screen. Okay, so if I go to yeah, so what was that? ng generate, and I had done this earlier. I was trying to actually, I think the font size, is this better?
I think so.
Yes.
Justin, Mike?
I'm good. That's much better.
Minimize
We
all
both
these-
nodded.
I'm like bad at like eyesight and stuff, so I'm not the one that should. Other sighted users should.
Yeah, I usually have it at much higher or much bigger font size, but I think this is okay. So you run this, and that's the path where I asked it to run, and it just generates this, and it even added a test file. But let's look at it, right? So it added it. Oh, I probably gave it the wrong path, which is fine. Yeah, so it added a form, and it added all these other, what's it called, validators. And its first field, it's an address form, so it's taking your first name, last name, and stuff like that. But at least it's a start instead of having to do it from scratch. I would say this is more a better head start than sometimes I've had with Copilot. When I'm like, build me a form, it doesn't always use latest material, or so this is a more reliable head start that you can have, because this is an address form. They pre-populated the states and all of that, but which you can edit however you want. They had it in on submit and all these form fields. And even in the CSS, they've kind of made it look pretty, so that you at least have a pretty looking form that you can then edit the way that you want to.
Yeah. What about Tesla? Show the spec file.
Yeah, it's a basic test.
Okay. I wasn't sure how in depth that went.
Yeah, it's a basic test. But yeah, it generates it for you. I guess it's the internal schematic is similar to ng generate component, and it just spits out a basic component spec file for you. So yeah, there are a few other similar components that you can generate based on your use case. I feel like it could be endless, right? There's so many components there. You can have so many variations of it that it's endless how many schematics we can desire for. But yeah, another new thing that they added, they haven't really added any new component to the list since forever. It's been just these components. And again, I think this was majorly neglected. Primarily because there are not too many people working on it, but also I think Angular team was focusing on Ivy, and then they were focusing on having their internals updated so that they're able to use Material 3. And now that they're finally able to churn out more useful components. So we had a date picker, which was helpful, but not too much. But now they've added a time picker too, which I know makes so much more sense for a lot of, like, even for our cybersecurity app, you want to be able to search for alerts based on a time range, not just a date range. And I think having that time picker is really helpful. But yeah, I know a lot of other libraries have so many more components than what Angular Material offers. However, you also have this CDK, which enables you to build on top of these components. So for example, like there's a menu component, but if what you want is not exactly what the material menu component looks like, you have a CDK menu component, and CDK just starts for component developer kit. So it just gives you a bare bones of a component for a menu, and you can style it and customize it the way you want. So it's not necessarily the material way, but it can be your own way. So for us specifically, material has been a great first step to build our own design system components upon. And I think that's what generally people do. Like just having a whole bunch of material components doesn't always suffice, because then your application looks more or less like an Google application and not your own enterprise application. So yeah, I think like step one is to have an understanding of it, knowing which component to reach for and how it is built upon and stuff like that. But then one of the main bottlenecks about this was, I'm gonna delete this because I added it at the wrong place. But anyways, one of the main bottlenecks about this has always been how to theme it. And now, so this is what I was talking about, that hopefully this is legible, that in your body you can include a math theme and just specify the color. You don't even have to specify typography. And then for dark theme, you can just make sure that the color scheme is dark, and the light theme, the color theme is light. So this is like the simplistic way you can theme an app, and it makes it so much more easier to use Angular material than it ever has been. Because earlier you would have to, like I was saying, specify a primary color whole palette. If you don't use the material colors, you would have to specify a color of your own and stuff like that. So so like I was saying earlier, the other alternate is that you generate your own palette. I guess those are in schematics. So
do you just give it like one color to generate off of, or how
yeah, so let's do that also. Why not?
Chat was talking about the CDK for a second while you were on that topic. Michael was saying that the accordion was like virtually impossible to customize, but with the CDK accordion, it allowed them to like imitate the component with their own styles. And then Steven saying that shout out to drag and drop. I was like, that's the first thing my brain goes to is CDK is drag and drop.
Yeah, they even added a two-way drag and drop recently, support for two-way drag and drop recently, which is great. And even Progress Stepper, like their materials Progress Stepper was a lot harder to customize, but at least you have the bare bones here. And you can just like, it's just a CDK step, and then you can make it style or have icons or whatever you want to have here using content projection. It's a nice starting ground for sure for most components that you want to build. Yeah, my hopes and dreams are that this list, the CDK list of components, expands even more than the Angular material list, because this is what I think people use more heavily.
It is that interesting, like you talked about it just a bit ago, when you have your own design system that you want to use, but you want to leverage Angular material or the Angular the material CDK, right? So that you're like, hey, there's a lot of elements of it, the material design, that fit to our design, but we want to enhance it a bit or tweak it. And then you get kind of in that world where you're like, I want to bring in Angular material and I want to utilize it, mix of that in the CDK. And I want to use Angular material because a lot of the stuff, like the button, is exactly what I want, just a little bit of tweak, right? But I still have this whole other design system that I want to do for other components. Like, how do you establish that, okay, material needs this theme, but my other design system needs this theme as well? How can you kind of merge the two so you're only like managing one theme that both of them use, right?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's what has made it from version 19 onwards, it's made it so much more easy to do that because of this whole concept of system variables. And honestly, that's the approach that I prefer and have been leveraging, that you don't rely on theming the way here's the thing. I think if you're given everything, you kind of don't want it. You want to have the power to pick what you want and leave what you don't want. And so by default, like I was saying, you can include the color and have all of this themed for you. And so let's look. So this is the default theme that I just showed you, and I have light and dark theme here. And I don't even know if these are the real breeds of these pets. I just added some photos and some breeds. So don't come at me about this is wrong information. This is just a demo out. And I just have a list. This is a material component. It's a button toggle component. These are all material buttons. These are all material cards. And this is a material toolbar. Doesn't have a different, this is a material icon button. What else? Ooh, that's a big image. Never mind. This is inside a material card. And yeah, it's just like very bare bone components that I have here for material. But oh yeah, those images are big. Okay, anyway, so this is what I get. Now you can see, like, when you show this, and or if I were to build this into an actual business, I don't want the edges to be as rounded, or I don't want the cards to be as rounded. I want a different elevation, and I want a different font family for my heading versus my this versus my that, and I want to be able to customize that left, right, and center. I don't want this this selected state of this button to be the same shade as this, and it's all relying on this one color, right? So and even for light and dark, it's just picking up the same color. I just have given it this one palette, and it's doing all its color science to determine which is the best color for dark theme based on contrast and stuff like that it should be using, which is not what you want. You want to be able to specify exact hex colors. So that's where this theme generate schematic comes in. And then the third way is just to heavily use system variables, and I'll show that approach also. But just for funsies, if you want to run the schematic, you just do that. And I'm no designer, barely have any sense of colors, but I like to use this website for colors, and it has all these palettes, and I try to pick a palette which has not similar shades but different shades. So I guess I can just go with this color and specify.
That site has a brilliant domain name, coolers.
Cool colors, yeah. And then all I have to honestly specify is this one primary color palette, and it can, like I said, it can generate colors. If I leave blank, it can generate other colors.
Okay.
Or I can specify other colors.
I was gonna say, if you have 3, does the schematic walk you through each one?
Okay. Yeah. And now I have an understanding, assuming I have zero understanding of or have zero experience with material. I come here, I run the schematic. Primary, secondary, tertiary colors make sense. What's a neutral color palette? I have no idea, but I'll allow it to generate it. And this is where, if you're using a schematic, you probably need to know more about material science and exactly how those colors are going to come into play. So, and then it's asking me, do you want to generate high contrast values? Let's skip that, because it'll just spit out a whole new bunch. And then it's asking me, where do I want to generate it? And then it's asking me if I want to use an SCSS file or a CSS file, which went on. And so then it creates this theme colors file. Let's look at it. So this is what it generated, right? And it generated these colors. This is the color that I defined. But watch, it's not being used anywhere. That's the hex I gave, but it's not being used anywhere, because the schematic, what it does, it picks up, it takes that color, and then it generates this palette for me. And it, like, all these hue definitions, it's defining based on, again, color signs that it. And then I have this primary color and tertiary color. Those are the two colors I provided.
So
It did
if
not.
you wanted to do hand picked every single color, you're in control. That's the number of colors you would need to, like, that you had just expanded with palettes where it was like every single shade. Like that's
Yeah. Now I think this is either, I gave it three colors: primary, secondary, tertiary. It only spit out two palettes because it essentially just uses two, and then it's using the rest here for the secondary color. And if I had given it a neutral color, it would have used that. However, like, it didn't ask me for an error color, which I need to be able to enter my form values or whatever, for whatever I need to display an error. It didn't ask me that, and I know there's an open issue for it against, and I saw it being closed, but it still didn't ask me for it. So I don't know. Um, I don't know what's going on there, but I did try that out. I think this is, yeah, this is the branch in which I had run it already. So now I have the primary palette that I just entered. So instead of using a material color palette like I had earlier in the other branch, this is the primary color palette that it generated for me, even though it did not do the exact match of the hex value, right? It still generated this color for me. And so, yeah, so this is the secondary color that I entered, the blue that I entered. And you can see for the dark theme, it has this blue and that blue. And so this is still a little more like the second level of customization that I was able to do by providing some specific values. But I feel like it's still, I could do better. And
But at
or
this
I would
point,
want
it's
control. Yeah.
at this point is decoupled now from material, right? Like if you went back to that SAS file, there's
Yeah.
nothing. The things that you're consuming here, the $_rest, $palettes, there's no names specified with matte or material design. Like now I
Yeah.
could consume this as my own design system could use these same keys as
Right.
well. And now I've
Right.
effectively have a global design system that then,
Yeah.
material is using it and my custom components. That's pretty
Yeah.
cool.
So yeah, I have my own palette. I have my own control, even though I didn't get a match of the exact hex values. However, I'm still having to do this bit, include mat.theme. And this is where sometimes some things feel like magic. Like earlier, if people remember from up until version 18, you had to do, it was a requirement to do an include of we had to write this line, include mat.core. No idea what it did, right? But we had to have it. So at least we don't need that piece of line anymore. It's all handed, but I still need to do include mat.theme. And the other part that you were mentioning, Justin, was that if, like, this is still theming just my material components, right? But the thing is that it spits out all these tokens, and that's what I'm leveraging to change the background color and the text color of my app. And I could use that for if I have other Angular components that don't use material, but I want to style them using the same hex values that I'm providing to my material, I can use these tokens to have that same values. Now, again, this is something that when you inspect, I guess you can see, so in this body, it has all these for fonts, it has all these for corners or edges, all these shapes, and all of these are getting generated because I specified include mat.theme. So it's taken those values and it's using CSS tokens that then is being pulled by all these other all the material components. Now, because these CSS tokens are added to body, if I have a component that's not material, but I want to be able to use the same color, I can just say, yeah, for a custom made component that I want to show some error things in, just use maths error CSS token and get that similar error color for whatever I'm trying to do there. But again, like this kind of makes sense, but again, I think for most, especially enterprise applications, you want to have the maximum ability to customize as much as you want, which is why I prefer using not this at all. If you want to use system variables, you don't have to use math.theme at all. You can just use, that was the generate. So this is what I have. Watch, like I don't have mat.anything, mat.include anywhere. What I ended up doing is that I added all these are all the tokens that you need. And how do I know which are these tokens? So if you go to material theme builder, this is also not an Angular material site, right? This is just by material, Google material. To help you build a theme, you can specify what your primary color should be. You can pick a color value from here. And then it kind of gives you an idea what your app would look like. And picking your font does nothing. It doesn't show up when you try to export it. Also, the site doesn't work on Firefox. I tried, but it's all these little quirks about all these little open source things. And then you can export it as a CSS file or a JSON file, and it'll spit out all these tokens that you need. That's one way how you can identify what tokens you need. But mind you, the tokens that it spits out, it has an extension of MD, but for material, we need it to be mat, of course. So I think there's a way to, no, actually, I don't know how to do that. I just had to do find and replace myself to fix it. I think I saw somewhere that there's a way, but I don't really honestly recollect what they had done. So what I end up doing is all these different tokens that we need, I end up defining them as mixins. And so for my light theme, I have all these colors defined. For my dark theme, I have all these colors defined. And typography, for all the typography tokens that material requires, I have all of that defined. And elevation is just for box shadows, and there are like 5 levels of elevation that are defined. And they have specified all of that in system variables, like all the tokens that you need also. So you can just copy them from here or from wheresoever and all the tokens that you need, and you can define them there. And like this is my personal way of architecting it, and there's a million other ways you can do it, but I think it makes it easy because then for my dark theme, I just include the dark theme system variables. And this is just if the user preferences to have dark theme, then your app will load in dark theme by default. And then I just include the light theme system variables for light theme, dark theme system variables for dark theme. And I include all the typography at body level. And so then now my app has all these definitions, and it's using the exact hex value that I provided it. And it no longer has those rounded corners, and I can like specify what the radius should be, or whatever should be for whatever basically. And another good thing about then it comes to, okay, for what exact component do I want to override what? That's where the documentation helps. That you can look at, suppose for a button, you have so many tokens based on whatever component you use, that you can override it. So just for, say, typography, if I want the buttons font family to be different, I have from whatever the default is. And again, like based on whether it's a fill button, outline button, text button, I can specify if I override this property and I use the CSS button overrides, I can override it to exactly which font.
Does this answer Michael's question in the chat? He was asking about the styles tab with individual overrides and the SCSS tokens. But is there a list of the SCS tokens to like the CSS variables? He was saying how like he can inspect element, but I can imagine that would be tedious. So is that in here?
Yeah, there's no, I'm not sure why you would need that mapping, because I think it's just easier to copy this and override it within the CSS file. And so if you notice, my button toggle component has some radius. And so that's what I did. I went to watch a thing over here. Yeah, I went over here. I'm lying. This is the component for it. Is it? It's somewhere, I promise. Yeah, here. So you can just override it. You can just select the value, and I just gave the shape to be 0.25 rem. And so if I do like 0.5, you can see that it's more rounded. Or even if I do like 999, it'll be more rounded. It'll look hideous, but it'll be more rounded.
I think you're right, Michael. He says I use SCSS a lot, but people are moving away from it. And when I tell people about the overrides, they ask me if about the CSS tokens. And I don't know about the variables, but I'm in the same camp of like, I used to be very Sass strong, and now I'm trying to do everything with just CSS because that's where it's going.
Yeah. And that's fair. If you don't want to use a CSS at all, and sure, that is not documented anywhere here. Like they tell you if there is a CSS token that is dependent on some parent token, they mention that. But what will the default CSS token of this become? That's not documented anywhere. And that I have had to inspect and find out. But the easiest thing to do in my experience has been to go to the body tag, and it just gives you a list of all the CSS tokens that are here that get applied. And you just copy those. Or for like a button, if you scroll all the way down, it'll just show you system large, or yeah, just select like this one I haven't defined, but it's picking up from a parent CSS token that internally it depends on. But if I don't want this button to have, if I want my filled buttons to have a different background, I can specifically mention that. And if I just wanted, so if I do like red, let's go hot pink. If I mention that, and I probably actually need to be, let's do that here, because I probably need to be in at least in a component that's using it, right? So then my primary color for the app is still this purple shade that I had selected, but the button, the fill button, is different from this outline buttons color, which has that other primary color still. So yeah, like I said, documentation is as good as it can be, I guess, for anything open source.
The tokens, the whole tokens thing is really something that unlocks a lot of stuff, right? For us to, you know, especially in that realm where you're like, I want to use material as a mix within my design system. There's still some things we got to figure out, right? Like, for example, if we have our design system and our design system is creating their own tokens, right? Its own tokens. And we want to use that as the source of truth. but we need to tell Angular material, oh, these are the values for your tokens. We need to bridge that gap, but we could do that, right? That's possible. So
Yeah.
still a little bit of kind of scenario there with working with that. But yeah, there's more and more opportunities there, I think, to start to solve that.
Yeah, and you can have so many variations. Like at the global level, my flat button has hot pink color that I gave it, but just within this component, it now has the green color that I gave it. And this is just colors, but for all other things like typography or even like spacing, how much padding there should be within a button, horizontal and vertical, and stuff like that. Like how much should the spacing be between a text and an icon within a button. Overriding all of that has made it super simple and easy, which was a pain because otherwise the only way to do this would have to override the internal API, which then is a pain in the whatever area you want to call it. So.
Or figure out that old big giant import thing that we used to have to do right at the top level, what it all added and how to hack that.
Yeah. So you have to still inspect a lot. I mean, it's the friction is definitely less, but it's still there. Like Michael was saying, the SAS or the CSS, again, like if you're not familiar, this is a CSS SCSS include of a mixin that the material team is exposing for you to use. But if you don't want to use SCSS at all, then you kind of still have to override it by defining system variables like so. And both like at whatever level you want to, these system variables, you can extract the main ones, but for a component specific ones, they're not documented anywhere.
I got you.
So that can be tricky.
Yeah, it's the old inspect. Did it work? No. Customize some more, and then once you get it perfect, you copy from the from the browser console into your
yeah, that's the thing for documentation. Inspect element is your best friend. You just look at, oh, the color comes from this token and the background color comes from this token, and even the font size comes from this token, and you just keep working on that.
Yeah,
I think in most dev tools you can command click on that over there and it'll take you to where that token was. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So you can also do that.
So right, but these are just at the body level of the base, the system level ones. That's why they have the maths. But for a specific component, if you want to go all the way up and look at mat filled button state layer, well, that's what I need for this to have a different background. Okay, so I have to define that.
I wonder if like a big reason that more tokens aren't available right now, or like more of these variables aren't surfaced, is because like once you do that and you put them in the docs, that's almost like you saying, customize this, we'll make sure it's maintained and move forward. Whereas if it's like a hidden layer that you're like digging into and you customize it, like for instance, like that one variable, like does that mean they don't have to maintain that variable name, or could they like swap it out next time?
Yeah, no.
Private APIs.
No, well, actually, that's actually not true. What the difference and what Michael's asking is that these tokens are exposed just by SCSS variables.
Right.
For example, this filled button state layer color, it is documented. Am I in the right button? Even state layer button. Oh, reset filters. Yeah, state layer. So fill state layer color. If I include this in like over here, if I do include, if I can type include mat dot button overrides, and I add it here and I give it some purple color.
You have badge overrides, FYI.
My what?
Weren't you looking for button overrides?
Oh yeah, sorry, batch. Yeah, you're right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Autocomplete. blessing and a curse. So if I do this, it will override. Where am I? The list. No, the list doesn't have a button, so I need to move this to the appropriate. I'll just move it here. And then app level. So wait. And this is where I need to have it in the component that's using it, which is this. And then I need to remove this. Oh, wait, I need to remove this because that's the same thing that I'm overriding. So if I do that, the token takes priority over purple. I should do blue so that people can see the difference. The tokens take priority over the CSS variable. Sorry, the CSS variable takes priority over the token. So it helps. It's the same token, but it's not exposed in CSS. It's not documented as a CSS token, but it's documented as a Sass mixin. That's the difference. So it'll still be there. Like it's changing the color to blue. So it'll still be there, but it's yeah, I don't know why they don't have it. They only have Sass variables documented and not CSS tokens. But that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was reading Michael's comment on the primary default versus specific component variable trade-off is cool and useful framing. Before doing a particular override, may be easier to set the primary token for consistency.
Yeah, it's definitely cool to be able to customize it or fine grain it as much as you want. So I agree.
This was so cool, and like we are at the top of the hour, so I don't know if you have any other parts of your demo you wanted to get to before we.
That's probably pretty much it. I think it's really helpful to at least know or have all these tools, even if they're at the bottom of your toolkit, to be able to build a new component. You can just lay it there, gaining some dust, but it's helpful to know, and it's cool that the Angular material team is focusing so much on being able to customize it, because earlier it used to be, no, don't customize us, otherwise you're on your own. And now they're like, look at all these ways you can customize. Come with us. So, yeah, I think that's pretty cool, and it's super developer friendly. You can choose your own adventure on how you want to customize it or how you want to theme it also. And some have more friction than the others, again, but that depends on what you're wanting to do. So
no, absolutely. Thank you for showing us that. There are a lot of updates, actually, so you were not wrong.
Yeah.
We are going to do picks. Can be something inside the community or outside the community that you want to highlight. And I'm going to ask Mike and Justin, do you guys have anything you want to highlight this week before we?
I do. Do you not, Mike?
I do not.
Okay. So I've been losing sleep over this game. I don't know how to pronounce it. Balatro? I know it's a kind of roguelike card game. I don't know. It's one of those things where like I've never heard anybody pronounce it, so I don't know. Balatro. But it's just like a card game that's a digital card game, right? That's roguelike, where you do these runs, right? You keep playing until you hit like an end, and then you restart and do the same thing again. But it's basically like hands of like poker and stuff, and there's wild cards and things like that you can unlock. And runs end up being a little bit wild, and you're like, you end it, and you're like, oh no, I need to do it again. I need to do it again. And then it's like 1 a.m., 2 a.m., and you're like, tomorrow, but it's so fun. So
Like, I don't need more things in my life that like
Is
do
that a
that.
solo
over your
game or
ears while I
team
say
game?
this, but
Is that solo or how's that roll?
yeah, it's single player. But then if you have like an Xbox Game Pass, which that'll be my secondary pick, is it's on there right now. So and you can actually play it on if you have the Xbox Game Pass for PC and Xbox and console, you can play it on either system. And
Playing card games on your Xbox is almost as wild as Ankita's FI ligature that she had going on. I was like that's crazy, Justin. You're like with your full controller and you're like card gaming, and it's all like.
I don't really look at it as like playing on the console. I look at it as more like I want to play from my couch.
Oh, okay.
Console to me is like I want to hang out on my couch instead of sit in front of my PC that I do all day. So that's how I distinguish the two.
Yeah,
It's
Michael's where I was
134
thinking
megs.
of it. I was thinking of your phone was like a with cards, but what'd you say, Mike? Sorry.
It's 134 megs. I just installed it.
Yeah, it's great. Small and you can play it on the cloud. You can do cloud gaming with it, so you don't have to install it. But it's addictive, so good luck, have fun.
Thank you. I shall download it. I don't have any picks for this week. Ankita, do you have anything you want to highlight?
Yeah, I think I can do two. First, my terminal that I use, Warp, is so cool and helpful because it now has, like all things, it also has an AI agent in it. Sometimes sometimes I forget how do I get what again. So I just tell it like I want to, even if I don't want to have to go back a commit or like write the commands for get anything, I'll just tell it in English what I want to do on this branch, like rebase this current branch with main, and it'll do that for me.
Wow.
Sometimes if I get an error while I'm running some file and the compiler errors out, it's like, oh, let me fix this for you, and it'll be like, do you want give me permissions to edit this file? Like, sure, like whatever you think should be the fix for that, do it. So it doesn't obviously.
How do you spell it? Is it?
It's WARP. Here, let me share my referral link, because then people who use that get like a cool, fun theme background and
absolutely.
Stuff like that.
I've always been an Oh My ZSH person just in the terminal, but I've gotten so used to lately using AI, and I'm really excited for agents. I'm like the opposite of people who are like, oh no, the robots. I'm like, please take my credit card number. I don't want to grocery shop anymore.
I just want them to do my laundry and stuff. Also.
All right. Okay. Yeah. We gotta get them arms. That's all I'm saying, right? Like they need arms.
Do my laundry, fold my laundry, and
I actually literally woke up this morning in the middle of a dream of I was in a picket line fighting for AI rights, like free the robots, like they're people too, and it was wild. Like.
Yeah.
Oh, you said you have two, Warp and.
So yeah, the other thing, I mean, it's all about making developer life easier, right? So this is one, and the other one, by the way, quick tangent back to material components, is that when you import, and if you can now import a component instead of a module, because they're all standalone. And the other thing, like all material components are change detection on push, so it makes, if you're heading towards the zone list direction, it makes it so much more easier for the app. And so if you use component versus module and you import something but don't actually use it, the compiler would give you a warning or an error. I think it's a warning. Maybe it's an error. Anyways, probably depends on what you have said, that you have imported something that you're not using, and then, bundle size and all of that, blah, blah, blah. So that's just for material components, though, that if you have imported something that you're not using for an Angular material component, it makes it easier to identify that. And then my coworker discovered this. It's called, I'll share the link for it too. It's called NIP, nip, I guess. And if you have unused files or dependencies or exports, then it identifies that, and you can just click, remove unused code. And we just discovered that, and we're very excited about it. So
very cool. Can I share that promo code, by the way, for the
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to share that in the chat, and then I'll put it in the YouTube description too. And then
Yeah.
here is the nip.dev URL as well.
Yes. The Barb is now in Windows. I think recently, first it was only in Mac OS and Linux. So everyone can use it, and I highly recommend that. It has been a game changer, and you can open multiple tabs and rename it. I guess you can do that at other places too, but
Nice.
I think it's
Very
super
cool.
customizable and helpful.
Thank you, chat, so much, especially Michael. You've been killer, on point with the questions and comments today. And thank you, Ankita, for like the amazing topic, giving us all the updates and doing live demos with all that entails. We really appreciate you for coming on with us.
Yeah, my pleasure.
All right, we're going to sign off, but we'll see you next time. Thank you, everybody. Bye.